talk Russo. Today is August 7th, 2008. Questa è la programma numero 4. This is the fourth episode of my program. Welcome to our community cable access television station here in Reading, Massachusetts. Since the program may be played in other towns, I have been giving out my cell phone number, which is 781-389-6879. You're welcome to call that number at any time. It's interesting that I have not received a call since I started this program on May 12th, 2008. I guess truth has prevailed, or come to this chair and tell us why I am not speaking the truth, or you have another point of view. This t-shirt I'm wearing right now is one that I wore during my campaign as a school committee member with Linda Phillips. This was in 2001, and it's very appropriate. Why don't our opponents want to debate us? In fact, the only debate that occurred during that time was a debate which was sponsored by a local organization, which did not allow the actual candidates to ask questions of each other. We wanted to have an open debate where questions could have been asked and they could have asked us, and this never happened. Just a quick review of our last three programs. It's called the Education Series, and the Education Series I've just conducted in the last three episodes is about a book called Where the Heart Is. My school committee member, actually a running mate, was Linda Phillips. She's courageous, and she actually blew the whistle and told the community about this book. It was front page headlines in one paper. Linda first testified, then I testified before the school committee about the numerous underclass behavior, and then we discussed the specifics in one of the programs. There's a pregnant teen was drinking alcohol. There was reckless driving with one, the driver was actually drunk. And then two female teens had at least 5 children between them by 3 fathers, and a multitude of profanities, and one was actually considering trying to abort her child by standing on her head. One school committee member was bombarded with emails and telephone calls, and the book was finally removed from the freshman and sophomore classes as a recommended reading book. Later, the other 2 grades were dropped, and today it may be possibly coming up for review in 2010. In episode 3 on my July 17th program, I then said, besides the school system sexualizing and desensitizing students, we also had another group called the Homosexual Agenda, represented by both the GSA, which is the Gay Straight Alliance, and also the GLSEN group. That's the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, which is in many of the school systems throughout Massachusetts. These particular groups are there to advance in one way or another steadily to encourage our students to engage in homosexual acts. If you're not sure about your sexuality, then try this, and possibly you may join us. That's basically a message they're giving to our students. At the same time, the school currently monitors through their Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which they conduct about every 2 years, talking about behaviors that are self-destructive. For example, you have sexual behavior as one. You also have substance abuse. You have also gambling and others, including suicide. I wrote a letter to the editor on July 16th talking about where the heart is, and made my same statements I made here on the program. A local woman by the name of Paula DiGiovanni responded to my letter, and I gave a quick summary of what was happening in the book. On the last show, my 2 first liberal viewpoints came and they called by phone, and they were Unitarian members, and they actually were offended by some of the words I used for the description of the church itself, that is, Unitarian Church. On one of the ads said, on the TV, on cable TV program, a liberal, welcoming, religious community. And then I said, this must be the motherlode of liberals, because obviously they did use the word liberal. And I've been trying to find liberals who are willing to come to the program to discuss their viewpoint. So that evening, we truly had the Unitarian counterpoint. But despite my letter to the editor and my urging at the last program to have Paula DiGiovanni, that is, nor her daughter, in fact, I'll be talking about her in a moment, Kim DiGiovanni, who actually called up after Mr. X did. Mr. X was he did not identify himself, but he was a Unitarian member of the church. I asked them if they would like to join me in a program, to call me on my cell phone, or otherwise none called me. So all of you, any of you, who are willing to call in the program, the phone number is 781-944-8888. I would like to respond to Mr. X, who is the Unitarian caller. In fact, he's welcome to call. I enjoyed the conversation with him. It's a matter of bridging some major differences and points of views. There were about 3 or 4 serious differences of opinion, which really were quite understandable to me, only because I had the information, but he wasn't aware of. And I like to clarify to the audience, or at least state to the audience, the sources of my information, and then you can make your own judgment. The first statement he made is, like you, he was addressing me, like you, I'm a political conservative, and I found that very difficult to understand because the Unitarian Church tends to be on the liberal side of most of the issues. So I didn't get involved with that at that point, but I would like to really go over that a little bit more with him. But one of the things he did say was that when we were talking about the book itself, he mentioned the statement, the separation of church and state. And I made a statement which I am now going to read from a pamphlet from the American Defense Fund. And everything I did say at that program is correct, but I will read a few comments, a few sections of this particular pamphlet, which is the truth about the separation of church and state. First of all, he claimed that it was in the Constitution, and then when I said it wasn't, he said it has to be in the Bill of Rights. And he was very positive and assertive about that. While the First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. There's no statement there about the separation of church and state. And really, what the revolutionaries who started this country, the colonists, they did not want to establish a church as they had in the country they came from. At least some of the people came from England, where the Anglican Church was a state-sponsored church. And they wanted to make sure that did not happen here. And along with that, I'll read from this booklet, the term separation of church and state was first used by Thomas Jefferson in a letter to the Danbury Baptists in 1801, when he responded to their concerns about state involvement in religion. Jefferson's letter had nothing to say about limiting public religious expression. I'll repeat that. Jefferson's letter had nothing to say about limiting public religious expression, but dealt with government's interference in the public expression of faith. Another point, it was U.S. Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black who first inserted the term separation of church and state into the American jurisprudence in his majority opinion of Emerson versus Board of Education in 1947. He wrote, "The First Amendment has erected a wall between church and state. The wall must be kept high and impregnable. We should not approve the slightest breach." Again, there was no such statement. And then he comes and he makes another one, which is actually shows you what an activist judge is capable of doing. Black's opinion was based on a previous misreading of Jefferson's 1801 letter, etc., etc. In the opinion, he wrote that the Danbury letter was almost, listen to this word, almost as authoritative declaration of the scope and effect of the First Amendment. So here he is making his own statement, and that's been carried through successfully and convinced many people in the United States. That is mostly by the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, who does everything possible to eliminate any expression. And the First Amendment protects you from expression. There's no religion, one or another, that's been established in the United States. So that's the first item. So he continued on, and he says he likes the school system because it's not government subscribed, which is fine. But I'm wondering if he would be willing to vote in favor of school vouchers, which is certainly one option. Then he mentions censorship. He doesn't like censorship whatsoever. Now, those two words, censorship and banning, used quite often by the left to try to minimize what you're saying. And really, there is censorship in the school. There are books not being used. It's just a matter who's in control. So if one teacher wants to sexualize and desensitize students, well, that's going to be used. So in this case here, that particular book was doing exactly what I was saying. Lots of things in that book, and you can listen to my episode number 2, and that would describe all the things you want. In fact, if you want to buy a book, I have a few extra ones at $2 a piece from Amazon. So in any case, here is a group, someone in the school system, or a group, some intentionally, some unintentionally, who chose this particular book. Now, there are other books that are far worse than this. So where do you want to draw the line? Where do you want to enter into the pornography issue? There's no discussion. They just simply say, well, that's censorship because you don't like a book that we like. Well, there's got to be a consensus. And the consensus from the community was very clear when one school committee member was bombarded with telephone calls and emails. So that's quite clear as evidence as to whether this book crossed the line. In fact, the book has been in the school system for several years. And when Mr. Scatini was hired in 2003, I was one of the school committee members who voted for him. He wasn't here at the time this book was in the system. But I want to thank him for taking making the decision of actually taking it off the list. So this gentleman was an Irish Catholic, and similarly I'm a Catholic, but he's no longer a Catholic, and he was very pleased with this homosexual minister who's done a good job for him in helping his son. Now, we next got into Terry Porter. He brought up the issue about Terry Porter, who was the Catholic priest who was celebrated as the first who was convicted of sexual abuse. But he used the word pedophilia. And I said to him, well, that word, as far as describing the priests, all of the priests, was not a correct interpretation. And then I told him about a Globe article, which I have in front of me here. It's dated March 17th, 2002. It says, priest abuse cases focus on adolescents. And the Globe quotes the attorney who brought many lawsuits, over, I think, about 200, and he finally settled for about $85 million for all of these plaintiffs. Roderick, I quote, Roderick McLeish Jr., a Boston lawyer, said 90% of the nearly 400 sexual abuse victims he has represented are boys, and 3/4 of them are post-pubescent. This is very important. Now, this is not, quote, an approval of the Globe. They're just simply reporting. And if this statement, if they felt there was any question about this statement, I'm sure they would not have printed it. Because when they say that, that means that 25% are what you call prepubescent. Those are not sexually mature children who are classically called, if someone abuses them, it would be called a pedophile incident. Now, I also want to take here another book. It's called the DSM-4-TR. It's been published by the American Psychiatric Association. They're the ones who make definitions or terms used in the psychological and also psychiatric business. And I will read from this quick reference. It's not the full booklet, but full book, but on page 256, they have a section on pedophilia. And I quote, "Over a period of at least 6 months, recurrent, intense, sexually arousing fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors involving sexual activity with a prepubescent child or children, generally 13 years or younger." And I reported 10 or 13. But also that has to be prepubescent. So the case here I mentioned 3 or 4 times was that as much as the public and the secular media wants to call it pedophiles, to separate themselves from the true aspect of this corruption of the Catholic Church, which was boys who were adolescent boys and men, same-sex attraction, and whatever word you want to use. Some use homosexuality, which is fine. Some refer to them as pederasts. Others will say it's a North American Man-Boy Love Association event, NAMBLA. Regardless, it's same-sex attraction. So 3/4 of all of these have been in that category. In fact, a study later by the John Jay Criminal Justice College, which is not a Catholic college, did a study, and they found, as I recall, 95% of the adolescents, or that is, of the people who were sexually abused were adolescents. So here you have a number anywhere between 5 to 25% were called classically pedophile cases. He went on to continue on with this statement about the fact that the Catholic Church should allow them to homosexuals to marry or have relationships, and this thing wouldn't happen. That's I won't get involved with that. But he also mentioned another statement right now by a gentleman, Phil Lawler, who wrote a book, Faithfully Departed. He was the former editor of the Pilot, which is the official news journal, a newspaper from the diocese. And he said he was his high school classmate. He mentioned, I quote, "He is an apologist and a paid employee of the Catholic Church. I don't trust anything he says. I know him very well." Well, what Phil Lawler did was wrote this book called Faithfully Departed, literally attacking the Catholic Church for its lack of attention to this issue that's gone on a long time. In fact, he was also, as I recall, one gentleman said he was fired from a position because he was too active in the pro-life, and he protested at different abortion clinics. So here's a case of a man who was truly an Orthodox Catholic, who was really criticizing severely to the point where he wrote a book against the Catholic Church. So as far as trusting him, well, the point is this, that he is not an apologist for the Catholic Church. No way possible, knowing what he has done. He also made a statement that I'm blaming the victim. Well, I never spoke about the victim. I spoke about the homosexual priests, and I spoke about whatever they did, including bishops. According to Phil Lawler in his book, 2 out of 3 bishops were complicit in either covering up or other things, as we know. I have not read the book, but I have ordered it, and I'll bring that information up a little later on. Another statement is that I said that the incidence of AIDS or problems in the world of sexually transmitted diseases was caused by men having sex with men. MSM is called by the Center for Disease Control. I don't have that article with me. I neglected to take it with me. But they say about 53% of MSM people contribute to the AIDS problem in the United States. And about 31% of heterosexuals contribute to the AIDS problem in the United States. Now, if you believe, and I will document in the next statement, that less than 1% of the population in the United States are homosexuals, then you can say at least 100 to 1. 100 to 1, and from these stats, it's 150 to 1. Heterosexuals versus homosexuals. So the predominant people involved with the AIDS issue in the United States are men having sex with men, or homosexuals as we define it. Another statement he made was that he said 10 to 15% of the population is homosexual. Well, I mentioned to him there's a book called The Social Organization of Sexuality, and it's by people who work, professors who've studied the subject from a secular university called the University of Chicago. I said Chicago University, but it is really called the University of Chicago, a college of great repute. There were several authors in this book who wrote, and I will now point out to you well, I have it memorized anyway. Let me see if I can find that document here. This book based its study on a statistically valid sample of over 30, to be exact, 3,432 people, men and women. And statistically valid studies are very expensive because you have to have a fairly large pool of people. This here is the only valid study, so valid that even the homosexuals used it in their defense at the time they challenged the sodomy laws in Texas. And I will just read some sections of this. It's called the NHSLS study. It's a National Health and Social Life Survey. By the way, if anyone wants to call, you can interrupt me at any time. Don't feel you cause any problem, because we had calls last time in the middle of what I said, but I'll continue on. So that was the actual organization, and this book was written in 1994. It is incomparable to the Kinsey study. The Kinsey study was by Mr. Kinsey, who was known to be at the least a bisexual and possibly even a homosexual. He had actually taken sample of people for his subjects out of magazines that he would try to recruit for this study. So he had a very biased sample, and no one, even in the homosexual community, gives this study, the Kinsey study, what he had performed in 1948, of any value whatsoever, and that is widely known. But yet, the homosexual groups continue to promote 10% in the population. And if you hear that word again, what you ought to tell them is that, you know, once the truth is known and you continue to use a statement that is not true, it's called a lie, just outright lie. And the first time now in many years that a homosexual group has now admitted, at least, to the fact that the statistics in this book are valid, or at least they believe they are, and they use them. Here's the actual statement here. In 2005, numerous homosexual organizations submitted to the Supreme Court of the United States a legal brief, number 02-102, Lawrence versus Texas sodomy case. On page 16 of this brief, footnote 42 states, the most widely accepted study of sexual practices in the United States, then NHSLS, the one I just mentioned to, found that 2.8% of the male and 1.4% of the female population identified themselves as gay, lesbian, and bisexual. So if you add those two figures up, you get 4.2%. But it's interesting how they continue to try to inflate the truth. The addition of bisexuality is not commonly used, but now in order for them to inflate the number, they use bisexuality. And bisexuality is people want to have sex one way one night and sex another way another night. So to me, when they say that homosexuality is inborn, well, here's a case where they're even accepting people who they can choose what sexuality they want, or at least what sexual acts they want to perform. So if you exclude that bisexuality, then the numbers come down to 2.9%. But what's also interesting, in this same book, there was another study done called the GSS study. And this particular study, it was actually a report, and they combined those two studies and reports. And they found together, and this would make the data even more statistically valid, because the greater the sample, the more accurate you are in judging what the population in the United States does, that is, of the 300 million of us. And that study, if you combine the two, and it's stated in this particular book, that the total number of homosexuals in the United States who are exclusively either female or male homosexual are 0.8% for 0.6% for men and 0.2% of women. That's a total of 0.8%, and that's why I use the figure roughly 1%. In fact, this was later confirmed by other countries. There's a British survey report saying 1.1%. There was another French study that said 1.1%. So here you have, and then there was also one in Canada. Let's see if I have that here. In Canada, and they said it's close to was 1% also for men exclusively homosexual, maybe 1.2, who knows. So anyway, I don't have those reports, but they're all around 1%. So anyone who tells you it's 10%, feel free to refer them to my program, or at least correct them right there. And if they insist that they're telling the truth, then you can say, look, you've been telling a lie for a long time, let's have the truth. And so when Mr. X quoted 10 to 15%, I said, you know, the reason you're doing that is to try to increase the validity of the number of homosexuals in the United States, to almost make it normal. And then, of course, I used the word abnormal, and that also irritated him. At that point in time, I told him, you know, normal, natural sex is between a penis and a vagina. That's natural. Everything else is unnatural. And that's why the Code of Laws in Massachusetts call it unnatural acts. Okay, we left it there, and so then after 20 minutes, he said to me, you know, and I invited him and others, and he said, well, you know, it's a setup. And he was accusing me of setting up him or his pastor, Tim Kutzmark, or anyone else. And I said, well, what do you mean by setup, sir? He says, well, you have control of the mic. I said, yes, I do. And you know something else? That if you were on any other live call-in talk show in Massachusetts, any place else, the most you get is about 1/10 of what the amount of time that you had. We spent about 20 minutes. So you'd have 1 minute, most likely. In fact, I go on these programs, or at least I call into them, and it's usually about 30 seconds to a minute, maybe 2 minutes. At that point in time, say, well, I appreciate that. Okay, well, you know, he's making these statements with accusatory statements, and yet I gave him all the time, and we had serious differences of opinion, and I wish that I'm sure he's listening. But it's not my intent to talk about you without you being here. I invited you here. You're not here. You're probably watching the Patriots. In fact, they start in 30 seconds, so my chance of upping my Nielsen ratings is dropping quickly. Another statement he made said, you know, you have a limited opinion of the students' intelligence. And he said specifically, denigrating intelligence of students. And this happened again with Paula DiGiovanni. And both of them said, you know, I have no trouble with this book. My daughter or my son they're under my tutelage or my parenting, and that's great. You know, why do we have the Youth Risk Behavior Survey in this particular town? It's not for the best parents. It's the ones who are not doing the work, and we see what's happening. That's the whole point. And I'm concerned not necessarily about Mr. X's children and Paula's children. I'm concerned about the most vulnerable in this town. Otherwise, we wouldn't have significant numbers of these issues for sexual behaviors which are climbing, or at least significant, to say the least. These are the students that we're looking to protect, because these are the ones that are going to become the next parents. So this is where we have to focus on, is focusing on students and children who are getting wrong signals for the last 40 years. So I didn't speak much about it at the time, but again, we have a problem with our society, and it's getting worse. And I made, well, I'll talk about in a moment, about an analogy here, but let's continue on. While after 20 minutes on our program, a young lady called, Kim DiGiovanni. Well, I asked her, you know, it sounds familiar. Were you the one I debated during a high school time when I was there? It was 2002. Several students, actually 4. Tim Caldis, who was a student, a senior at that time, led the group, and we had a panel debate. I was on one side, I was pro-MCAS, and the other 3 students were not in favor of the MCAS. And Lauren was the name. I didn't recall her first name, but I remember the last name, DiGiovanni. So Kim is the sister of Lauren DiGiovanni, and she came on. And she's a junior at college. It was St. Joseph College in Maine on summer vacation. You know something? I admire the Giovanni family. They're not on my side politically, for sure. They're Unitarians, and they literally have, and I stated before, in fact, one of the things that they do is that they favor polyamory, which is many loves, that is any number of people together. And I'll talk about that another time, because there are several issues I want to discuss about that. But they have essentially a libertine sexual attitude. Do what you want to do, it's your business. So in any case, that's hurting a lot of people. And so they're obviously on that side, but I admire that family. Here you have the mother coming on the phone, you have the daughter who's in one area, and then you have another one here at St. Joseph College calling me. So I admire that. I wish there were more Christians who had the courage to do what these people are doing. They stand up for what they believe, and they're not afraid to make public expression of what they believe. In my Catholic faith, public expression almost doesn't exist. In fact, I haven't had a call. I take it back. Tony Lalicata, he has a program here, and he's from my church, the St. Agnes Church, and he has called in and appreciative of the program. And so, except for him, no one else has made a public expression that I know of. They have spoken to me privately, but today we need more people on our side, and we're the great majority of all of the people. The Unitarians are a very small fraction, yet they have done a tremendous job in getting their agenda through. Okay, so she read this book when she was in 9th or 10th grade, and she said, I never thought about getting pregnant from reading that book. And even her friends said the same thing. She said, I'm a junior in college, it's fine. And then she said, you can't hide it from the kids, it's going to happen, especially when they get to college. Well, you know, the colleges are corrupting children. In fact, I'll never forget the time when I was a certifiable liberal, more so than many others today. I voted for Ted Kennedy before and after Chappaquiddick, Dukakis, Eugene McGovern, Eugene McCarthy, Mr. McGovern, who ran for president. I supported all of them. And later on, I found out that really the Democratic Party was going down the wrong track. In fact, they're way off the track. they promote irresponsibility. And I'll talk about that in another time. In any case, we continue on here, and you can't hide it, especially when you get to college. Well, my boss said to me when I was a liberal, he says, I won't send my children to a Northeast college because they're too liberal. I don't want to indoctrinate them. And boy, was he correct. It is far worse today, and even in Catholic colleges in New England, in this area, Northeast, are simply allowing all of this to happen. In fact, I met a gentleman who was a good friend of mine. He has daughters who are going to college, and it's chic. I repeat, it's chic to be a female homosexual in college. It has gotten so much, it's been normalized so much today that it's reached that. He said the males are not so in favor of that. But anyway, it's going to happen. The kids are going to be going to college. They're going to be immersed in this. And essentially he's saying, give up. Do nothing. And people of my age who know better, who know what the consequences are silent. They're shameful. And I give the analogy of the frog. I've said it many times, but one more time for those who haven't heard it. If you put a frog in a boiling pot of water, he'll jump out because he senses the heat. But if you put a frog in a pan of water and start heating the water up, you find that the frog will die in that pan before he jumps out. And that's what we're doing. We're cooking. We're cooking and cooking, and the younger generation is being cooked. And to the point where they don't sense the difference. And they will pay dearly, and we're all paying dearly from the standpoint of cost. As I said, the theme of my program is the way Massachusetts should be, of course, according to me, until you tell me otherwise. And it will cost less because many of these self-destructive behaviors are occurring in high school. They're being normalized, drugs, suicide. In fact, another interesting point about marijuana, and that's one of the most frequently used drugs in the high school or any other place, is that there's a connection between the incidence of suicide with those who do use marijuana. I don't have that with me, but I will get that, and we'll have a program on drugs and substance abuse. Today, as far as homosexual marriage, give you an idea how the younger generation is cooked and being cooked more and more so, is that if you look at the percentage who approve of homosexual marriage, 75% approve. When you look at the middle-aged people, about 50%. People of my age, it's only 25%. So here you go, you see the normalization of this idea of homosexual marriage being accepted and many other things which I'll just mention to you. And this idea of normalization, I mentioned defining deviancy downward, which was a phrase coined by a former Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan of New York State, where he called defining deviancy downward as basically tolerating more and more deviant behavior. And one other gentleman, a famous poet and writer called Alexander Pope, in writing in the 1600s in an essay on man. And these 4 sentences, a brilliant guy. He says, vice is a monster of so frightful men, M-I-E-N, meaning demeanor or appearance when you look at vice. As to be hated needs but to be seen. So once you see this vice, you know, and see people who are raised in single parents and families, and the black families, especially in Boston, the out-of-control fatherless families. Then you have drugs. Then you have other kinds of things, suicide, gambling. These vices, you see them, but we don't. Gambling is pretty well accepted now. It's gaming now. It's games. These are all not gambling, Yet, seen too oft, familiar with her face, you see it over and over again. We first endure, then pity, and then embrace it. And I could not express what's happening better than what Alexander Pope did here. Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan said it quite well, but this gives you the whole story in the most succinct words that you can make or write. Anyway, when I was questioning Kim, she said, she says, well, you know, it's out there, you're going to have it, we can't do much about it. And what I liked her statement where she said that there's no difference between children being raised whether a heterosexual couple is married or not. So here's another way of, you know, being cooked. She doesn't see a difference. And it took me 3 or 4 questions to get that statement. Another thing she said, about okay, I guess that's about it, about what she says. So overall, we have her actually affirming what is happening to the next generation, children or students who accept this. And do you think that we're going to continue on with marriage? Not likely. And the fastest growing marriage today are those who are cohabitating with families. So these children are going to be subjected to a lack of commitment. And this is the exact thing that's in the homosexual lifestyle. And that'll be a program another time. Well, what does this all mean? Well, what it means is that our society is going to pay dearly. We have been paying dearly, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And the reason is that children are hurting in these relationships. They engage in activities, they express themselves through these self-destructive behaviors. And so this is going to continue on. And I'd like someone to tell me how cohabitating couples is a good way of bringing up children. And there's nothing to stop that other than people like myself and others who stand up and help them understand that this is not the way it used to be, and it's self-destructive. For example, in my time, about 5% of the white population couples were divorced, while as far as the blacks go, the black families, 30%. And this was in about 1950s. This is well established. The Hispanics have a number between those two. Today, 30% of the heterosexual couples are now single-parent women who are raising their children fatherless. In the black community, it is 70%. These figures are solid by all sources. And what is happening in the black families is all this self-destructive behavior. You pick it up in the paper and you see what's happening. School's a problem. You're paying billions to try to get students to do what we used to do in half the size of the classes. And I have photographs of my high school class of 55. Today, in the Reading school system, you talk about 20, 24, 25. Wow, that's getting near the limit. So it costs us double right there because we do not have the most stable unit in the community, the family, to raise children to adulthood. What I'd like to do now is to continue on with what I was talking about, is how the homosexual agenda is actually sexualizing and desensitizing students. I mentioned the homosexual agenda. I won't read it again. It's the 1972 Gay Rights Platform, which said that, they want to eliminate all the laws governing the age of sexual consent. Then they also want to repeal all legislative provisions that restrict the sex and number of persons entering into a marriage unit. In fact, when I was talking to Kim, I was bringing her down to see how well she thought about what was happening. When I said, well, suppose I was a bisexual and I had a woman lover and a male lover and I wanted to get married, would you object to that? And she said no after 2 or 3 questions. And then I said, well, how about any number of people? Oh, that's polygamy. As if we just fell off the cliff. But in actuality, that's what they're promoting in the Unitarian Church. Not all the churches, but if you download one of the websites, uupa.org, you'll find that they are promoting polyamory. So anyway, this is their objective, the 1972 Gay Rights Platform. Next, I spoke about an event that happened at the Tufts College in year 2000, in which 2 homosexual women were teaching a class on graphic sexual techniques. This was an event, and remember I told you about GLSEN, Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. Every year they have a program, and this program happened to be at Tufts. And there was a young man who went in and tape recorded the whole session, and they were talking about things to children or students between the ages of 11, 12, all the way up to senior. Talking about fisting, and fisting is inserting your hand into an orifice of another person. This is how to express your love. So you get all these kinds of things happening, and that caused a tremendous furor in the community, and so that's another piece of evidence. Another one is the Little Black Book. The Little Black Book was a book that's used by the Fenway community, which is there to help out homosexuals with the correct activities, at least not doing things that would hurt themselves. Well, this little book happened to reach a table at the, again, another Gay Lesbian Education Network event at the Brookline school system. And it's used by the homosexuals and advising about different things. And, you know, you talk about things that are natural and things that are unnatural. You know, they talk about golden showers. And I won't go into anything beyond that because it is just really something I don't want to talk about. Golden showers is urinating on another person. It's a nice fancy name for some activity that is really offensive to most people. But again, people call them normal. And I talked about the word normal before when Andrew Sullivan states that truthfully, they're not completely normal. In fact, his book is called Virtually Normal. Another piece of evidence is the All Things Considered. This is NPR. And they questioned an 8th grade female homosexual at the Brookline school system, another fine school system like Lexington. And the teacher was asked in this interview, well, some students say that female homosexuals can't have sex. And so Mrs. Allen, and I quote from this particular article, all right, so can a woman and a woman kiss and hug? Yes. Can a woman and a woman have vaginal intercourse? And they will say no. And I'll say, hold it. Of course they can. They can use a sex toy. This was to an 8th grade class. Now, with the advent of homosexual marriage, you can better believe they're expressing their determination to bring in all aspects of safe-sex acts in every school system. Otherwise, they'll sue the school system. There was also another GLSEN event. Again, the organization continues to spew all of this self-destructive behavior. In this case here, we have the 18th annual conference. It's a conference book. And we talk about the high school, but that's not where it's going to end. And I read one of the courses, Empowering Middle School LGBTQ. I'm not sure if they're going to run out of the alphabet here. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, And then they have questioning. And so they're talking about going into the middle schools. Many of the children's books are published by the largest gay publisher. Allison Publications are graphic, homosexual, and pro-pedophile books in the United States. Now, here's one. Well, let me give you the actual books. There's One Dad, Two Dad, Brown Dad, okay? All about homosexuals. A Family. Again, all these elementary school books, let me point that out. Here's two guys there looking in on their child there, adopted child, obviously. This one, Who's in a Family, caused a tremendous ruckus in Lexington. David Parker, who is now fighting a case. It's going all the way up to the Supreme Court, possibly. Then you have the Duke, Outlawed Jelly Beans. Then you have Gloria Goes to Gay Pride. You know, you go to those gay pride events, and I can't believe anyone would bring a child. But in San Francisco, it is so sick to see people, literally, a man, and I have a picture of that man with people lined up on both sides of the street, walking naked, nothing on him, no covering, no fig leaf, as in the old days, nothing, walking, and women in various attire, which was very similar, but not, at least the ones I saw not. But they also had the sadomasochistic event there. One guy beating another guy with whips. Another common, of course, that's normal. Jennifer Has Two Daddies. My daddy, Papa, and me. One after another, after another, after another. And then we come to a real good one, called The King and King. A second grade teacher by the name of Heather Kramer, a Unitarian. I'm waiting for the Unitarian counterpoint. Please call. A Unitarian who read this book called The King and King. It actually talks about a king who was looking for a queen to marry. Instead, he marries the princess's brother. And what is sad also about this book, it's written by a couple of female homosexuals, is that the Queen Mother, you talk about demeaning marriage and all that, and she says to her king son, I don't understand you. Every prince in these parts is married, every one of them but you. When I was your age, I'd been married twice already. Now, why would they read this statement to a second grade class of impressionable children? This tells you the true intent of the homosexual agenda. They want to destroy the meaning of marriage to the youngest in your family in schools. They're trying to normalize divorce, that you don't have to worry about staying married. This is really the tip of an iceberg. Then he had another one called King and Family. And there we go. This Allison Publications. I got all these books, and I noticed a locus of points. Allison Publications is a little rabbit here. Allison, Wonderland. Very good. Notice how they are able to use the words of some of our most treasured stories of Alice in Wonderland and convert it to their way. All of these books, Heather Has Two Mummies, Allison in Wonderland. Sorry, Allison Publications. The Duke, One Dad, Two Dads, etc. And then at the end, I called and I asked for some information about this. And they sent me this romantic adventure and free gift for you, 1 page away, Allison Books. Well, when I opened it up, it was graphic homosexuals. One guy's head was another guy's crotch. And then, not only that, I got this book from the college, Salem. Tom Carroll, O. Carroll that is, Pedophilia, the Radical Case. Allison Publications. Here is a pro-pedophile book right in this particular publisher. New gay book discusses sex at prayer. So here you go. Who they're going after? They're going after your children. Our grandchildren are going after. Here's a graphic homosexual publisher publishing elementary school books. Well, we had no calls tonight. Obviously, they don't have courage. When you speak the truth, they have to come up with something. And they have decided to remain silent, which is fine. The more silent they are, the more you can make your decision as to why they don't want to come. And it is not too difficult. They cannot stand the heat. They don't want to. They have achieved everything. And it's sad, and we have to rise up to do something about it, and that's why I spend my time doing this. Now, the next particular show will be with another gentleman. His name is Bill Webb, and he and I have both prostate cancer. So we'll be talking about our prostate cancer experience. Fortunately, mine is very, very low grade. So I'm going to be around for much longer than you want me to be. But I will help other men in this particular, or in this next event. And there'll be other programs. We'll have one on the environment, one on religion. In fact, I very well would look greatly to having Mr. X come in and talk about, he's a former Catholic, to come in and talk about why he made the change to Unitarianism. I would like to talk about religion. I have spoken a little bit about marriage, a little bit about family, but all of these things are part of the show here of Johnny Straight Talk Russo. And if you'd like to call me at any time, you're welcome. Again, there aren't too many people watching the show. This is fine. They're enjoying the Patriots. And so, at least the men are. Not sure what the women are doing. But I've gotten favorable discussions from others who are looking forward to, these tough subjects. But that's what I'm here to do, is to speak about difficult subjects which impact our lives. And I'm here as a low-income person from Chelsea, and I know how it is to live in a low-income family. And those are the ones I'm trying to protect. The ones who have good families, everything else is not much. But your children are being exposed to this. And even Michael Festa, former state representative from Melrose, complained about all this sexuality. Yet he was up there really trumpeting homosexuality during the time of the Constitutional Convention. So I really feel that my generation has failed, and I'm trying to give them some backbone. All of this information is available to anybody. Just call me, and you can do, maybe not as well as I can, but you can be better, and you can take it to the next step. You cannot let one segment of society just dictate and really subvert the family and allow that to happen, because it's going to cost you dearly. Billions of dollars nationwide. If this continues on the same track, if enough people do not come forward and speak about what's happening. So I look forward to the next program, probably be in about 2 weeks. And we'll have if you want to talk about anything else, if you have other subjects, I'll be glad to enjoy your comment on anything. If I'm wrong, come to tell me. Remember, this is what we're looking for. The counterpoint from those who promote irresponsibility, and then even people call themselves religious, as I pointed out. And I will another time talk about other things the Unitarian Church has done, along with Heather Kramer. So thank you very much. Almost.